Hello, this is Ray Gelato, and this is Gelato's Parlour. And have I got a very special episode for you this week? And I'll tell you what it is. We're going to be doing this one live from one of London's most iconic music venues. In fact, I go as far as say that it's one of the most iconic music venues on this planet in the world. It's the world famous 100 Club on Oxford Street, number 100 Oxford Street. And the 100 Club has been going for many years. It was definitely and still is my musical home. I've played there since the early 80s and really started my career down there. And I'm going to be meeting the owner, who's a very good friend of mine, Mr. Jeff Horton. And Jeff will tell us all about the great artists that have played this wonderful venue. And anybody who's anybody has played at the 100 Club. So I hope you enjoy it. How are you, Jeff?
Oh, I'm good, thanks, Ray. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm good, but I really appreciate you coming on this podcast.
No, it's a pleasure.
But and it's really nice to. My whole idea with this is to interview characters, you know, and people that are doing things, and also rather than just talking about old stories from the past and things about me, you know, my career. It's nice to find out people who have been keeping the whole scene in London going. A couple of weeks ago, we had Anthony Polledri on, Bar Italia.
Yeah,
boss,
brilliant.
And he was talking about the pitfalls of the bar and the good things and the bad and the ugly, you know.
Yeah, of course.
And that's really what I want to speak to you about. But basically, just to give us a brief resume of how you got started, and your dad used to run this. So just tell us what happened.
Yeah, so it basically, my nan was a shareholder here. She became a shareholder in 1958. Her boss was an accountant called Ted Morton, who also had a shareholding here. And when one of the shareholders left, he advised my nan to buy his shareholding. So she did. And she she owned a third of the company. And then another shareholder retired, and my uncle became a shareholder. But for some reason, it wasn't really for him. I had no idea why. So he ended up selling it to my dad in 1964. My dad had a record shop in Walker's Court. At the time, and he sold that, and with the proceeds he made on his shop, he bought the shareholding here. And the first thing he did, funnily enough, was take the word jazz out the title, because it had been London Jazz Shows, the London Jazz Club. It had also been called Humps after Humphrey Littleton. His agent Lynn Dutton owned it, and my dad named it the 100 Club because of its location at 100 Oxford Street.
So was your dad, by the way, Jeff's dad was Roger Horton.
Roger Horton, that's right, yeah. And it was my dad that then immediately changed the sort of the music here, because it had been primarily a jazz club, jazz 7 days a week.
Which artists would have just give us a couple of artists who would have played here since about
Lonnie Donegan played here, Chris Barber played here, Acker Bill, Alex Welsh, all those sort of British type players, but also people like Peanuts Hucko played over here, who was like Glenn Miller's
clarinet player.
Yeah. And actually. During when the club first opened, when it was Mac's Restaurant in 1942, and all the US servicemen were over here during the war, Glenn Miller often popped down, put his head round the corner and got up and had a jam a couple of times.
In this very room we're sitting
on that very stage as well, yeah.
Because by the way, Jeff and I actually sitting in the 100 Club. That's why you got a bit of an echo in your acoustic. But we thought for authenticity we'd do it. So these icons used to pop down here as well.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, Peanuts Hucko. I mean, he ended up playing here in the 70s and 80s before he died. But during the war, he was often down. And Louis Armstrong, he was touring with Humphrey Littleton at the time when it was Hump's Club. And Hump was doing his residency here, and Louis just walked in and just walked on stage and did like a couple of numbers with him and stuff. So, you know, that's how far back this club goes. In fact, I don't know if you know, Ray, but it is actually officially the oldest live music venue in the world.
You know, I didn't know that at all, but it doesn't surprise.
There were places that opened before us, but they've all shut. So it's the longest running music venue
That's
in the
incredible.
world.
So what we're really doing is we're sitting in a piece of history, but it's not just nostalgic history; it's an ongoing thing. Because we'll get to that in a minute. But so what happened when your dad took it over? Give us a little...
So the first thing he did was he had residencies. He carried on doing the jazz for maybe 5 nights a week, but he had residencies with the Stones and the Kinks and the Who when they were the high numbers, and so these bands started playing down here. In fact, he tells me that when he did the Kinks residency, I think he had 6 Thursdays in a row, once a month, and the first time they played down here, they had about 45 people here. By the last time they played, You Really Got Me had just gone to #1, and their very next gig was down here at the 100 Club. He said there were like 2,000 people trying to get in. It's just incredible, yeah. And it's funny, that kind of eclectic music taste has taken us through every genre you can think of. So we played jazz here for years and years, blues. So we've had, people like Muddy Waters have played here.
I saw him here, Jeff.
Did you?
I did.
I never knew that.
I saw Muddy Waters here, and I also saw Jimmy Witherspoon down here.
I've seen Jimmy Witherspoon here as well. Yeah.
When did Muddy Waters play here?
I think he played here twice. I think he played here once in the 1960s. Now,
the 80s he played here, though.
And in the 80s, I think in the early 80s he did. But somebody told me, I'm not sure how much truth there is in this. I'm sure somebody listening will sort of do some research and tell me if there's truth or not. But someone who knows a lot about the club, one of my dad's mates, he reckons that when Muddy Waters played here in the 60s, it was the first time he'd used an electric guitar. It's a bit similar to the Bob Dylan thing. Do you remember when he went from, he was playing in New York and he went from playing acoustic guitar to electric, and there were all boos and people walking out.
Right,
it was I'm not sure what the crowd's reaction was, but I've been told in pretty good by someone who knows a lot about the club that actually Muddy picked up an electric guitar for the first time when he played down here.
That's something. Because I remember coming, we'll get that in a minute, but I'm sure I saw him, but I definitely Witherspoon, and I saw the great sax player, one of my, Eddie Lockjaw Davis.
Yeah, Eddie Lockjaw. We got a photograph of him on the wall.
You have James Moody.
Yeah, James Moody. I saw him. Yeah.
And oh man, Big J McNeely.
Big J McNeely. He played here a lot of times.
Me being a sax nut, I saw a lot of these people. But basically, just carry on a little bit about what your dad did.
So my dad.
We can get to you.
Yeah. So my dad really is responsible for the club being as eclectic musically as it is. You've just mentioned all those names. But my dad was also, the guy in charge of the club during the era where we'd end up sort of doing shows with Radio London. So you'd have the 3 Degrees would just come and mime to records, and then the DJs would play the hits of the day, or the oncoming, the future ones coming up, all on white labels. And my dad used to bring them home in beer crates, and me and my brother, and we used to sit there. And we had all the mates in the school wanted to come round to our house because we had all these records before they'd been released, because the DJs just used to leave them here. So he was doing stuff like that, and then he would do shows with bands like Roxy Music playing down here, and then you'd get a lot of the sort of British blues guys, that movement. And then of course the thing that really sort of set him apart really was the fact that he started doing the reggae lunchtimes here. And the police hated it. I mean, they just really didn't like reggae coming into central London. For them, it was the domain of Holloway Road to the north or Brixton to the south. There's nowhere it's coming here. And my dad got stitched up. So many times the police would come down here and just go, there's a reefer on the floor there.
Wow.
If we come back here and this is happening again, we're going to shut you down. And then, of course, the other thing that he did around the same time was the whole punk thing.
That's what I was going to hit upon, because my first introduction to this club was I was underage, so you can't say,
of course.
15, 14, my age my son is now, and I was a teddy boy, right? But I used to wear the tight winkle pick at the drain pipes. I was at school, and someone said to me, they got a soul boy thing at the 100 Club.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know why I was a teddy boy, ended up, but I ended up as a Saturday lunchtime soul boy event down here.
Yeah.
They did have it, didn't I?
They did. Yeah, they did.
Now, that was the era of where the punk was starting out as well. So when we say soul boys, I remember seeing people with a Johnny Rotten, the spiky haircuts. But tell us a little bit more about the punk stuff with your dad.
So my dad was a very good mate with a bloke called Ron Watts, and Ron used to be a sort of promoter. And in fact, Ron also was in a band called Brewers Droop. He was the lead singer. And it had Mark Knopfler on guitar from Dire Straits. And Ron was in this band and they played there a few times. But then he started dabbling in the sort of blues. And my dad said that, some of the stuff that he put on down here was absolutely just like that proper R&B 1950s, 1960s stuff. 3 Tons of Joy and all that kind of thing. And he didn't see him for a little bit. They sort of, Ron sort of disappeared. And then he turned up in around February 76 and went, Roger, I've discovered all these bands. And my dad said, who are they? He goes, well, there's the Sex Pistols, there's the Clash, there's Susie and the Banshees, there's Stinky Toys. He said, I'd like to give some of my residency down here. My dad went, well, if you think, we've got to do okay out of it. And So the Sex Pistols had a residency here from about February, March '76. They played every one Thursday a month. And actually, I've got photographs of them on the wall, and there's like 2 blokes and a dog in here. There's nobody in here watching them. Yeah, no. And Ron also had a place in High Wycombe, a pub. I can't think what it's called now. And he was putting a lot of this punk stuff in, and gradually it was getting bigger and bigger, and then the Dam came across, and then eventually Ron said to my dad, look, I would really, really like to do a punk festival, or punk special as he called it, over 2 nights in September. Can we use the 100 Club? My dad said, yeah. And basically, the rest is history. The whole thing started down here. I mean, obviously, I think the Sex Pistols' first proper gig in London was at the Screen on the Green in Islington. But the association with punk here is
here, with the
unbelievable.
Sex Pistols.
And actually, you speak to any punks now, and this is like a mecca. I mean, we'll probably get disturbed at some point during this interview where someone will come down and go, is that the same stage John Lydon? In fact, I've met John Lydon a couple of times. I mean, he's my, I don't know if you know, but I'm punk through and through. I may not look it, but I'll tell you a little story. My mum and dad moved me from London down to Dorset, and I remember going to this under-18s disco in the Royal British Legion in a village called Ferndown, and the DJ was shit. I mean, he was playing the theme from Vandervolt, for Christ's sake, to under-18s, and like, come on, dance with the Saturday night band. And suddenly, he put on Anarchy in the UK. And it was that seminal moment. It was just like 3 minutes, seriously, that changed my mind, changed my life forever. And a couple of years back, last year, we launched the first ever book about the 100 Club. Have you seen it, by the way?
I don't think I have.
Right,
no.
I'm going to give you a copy at the end of this interview.
Love to, love to.
And we got Public Image to play John Lydon.
Yeah.
And at the end of the show, I went to go in to speak to John, and John's minder is a bloke called Rambo, who's an ex-Arsenal hooligan. And I went to walk through the door, and he goes, what do you want? I went, I just thought I'd come and say hello to John. He goes, no. I went, Rambo, it's Jeff. And he went, oh yeah, I remember you, yeah, you can go in. I said, no, it's fine, we don't know. He went, fucking go in, it's fine. So I walked in, and John was sat down there, and I went, John, and I said, it's Jeff, I've met you a couple of times before, I run the venue. And I just saw this vague look of familiarity going across his face. I went, one thing I've never said to you, John, is you changed my life in 3 minutes when I was a 15-year-old boy when I heard Anarchy in the UK. And he looked at me and he went, you're going to make it all emotional now, haven't you?
Did he say that?
That's what he said to me, yeah.
Because I remember when all that stuff came out, and because I was sort of like a Ted in a way, young, we hated the punks, know, but we were really old figs when I think, we were the equivalent almost of the mouldy figs that they said in the 40s. But when I look back now, the whole thing was completely revolutionary.
Oh, it was.
And it was a piss take. Lydon was almost taking the piss in a way, out of the establishment. And that was real sort of like
I think McLaren's role in it was what really got... He was a very clever bloke, McLaren. I mean, he ripped them all off and he's done all kinds of things since, but what he did with punk was extraordinary, and it was completely revolutionary. Ray, I've said, I'm 58 now, and I've said, when people say to me, how do you feel, Jeff? Do you feel, would you wish you were a bit younger run the club? I go, no, because I lived through punk. And it was...
We saw good things.
We haven't even come close ever since then. And also, Ray, people forget the things that it did. So if you remember about punk, it grew up in a backdrop of race riots. Tottenham was on fire.
Yeah, I remember.
Brixton was on fire. Liverpool. Yeah. There was all these issues, and it was punk that put a fucking grip on it, not politicians. So you'd have people like Joe Strummer, for instance. Joe Strummer, instead of having a support band, he'd have Don Letts, the DJing. Paul Weller and the Jam. Instead of having a support band, they get Adi Crowsdale, who does the Northern Soul All-Nighters down here, playing Northern Soul, black music.
So much came out of it. And the other thing I find hilarious, though, it's funny that you're talking 1 minute you have Louis Armstrong years before, right? And Jimmy Witherspoon, and then you have bloody punk rock.
I know.
But that is the beauty to me. How can I put it? In a strange way, I look at music as a brotherhood. Yeah. We're all out there doing it. Yeah. We're all suffering the same hardships with the travelling. We're all suffering the same amount of successes, rejections, no matter what style we play. Yeah. And the older I get, the more I realise that we're all connected in a certain way, and we're all doing our bit to bring something.
And the other thing
world.
as well is that the reason punk is so important for me, Ray, is because punk isn't about, and I've said this a million times, it's not about a 3-chord guitar riff and a haircut, it's about an attitude. You're a punk. You've got it. You've had it for years. You've had it in buckets loads, Ray. I must have seen your band 200 times.
Yeah.
And every time I see you, you're giving it your best shot, and the passion and the care that
you know why
have.
people like it? Because I play, you know, we're not going to go on this show, you and I, and start talking about swing music, and we can touch upon that because everyone expects me to do that. They don't realise I've got a lot more to me, and I grew up in London. And what you said is right. I grew up on the council estate in Ladbroke Grove, and when I do the jazz or the swing, I always think I put a punk and a rock and roll energy behind it.
You see it, especially
that's the way I sell it.
Especially in small venues like this, you see punk in everything. You see it in everything. The reggae artists, guys like yourself, people like Chris Barber's band. I must have seen Chris Barber's band 100 times here. They had it in bucket loads, that band.
You know what, you've got it. And the sad thing is, and again, we don't want to touch upon this too much because we're really talking about the 100 Club and the artists and the whole movement this place has kind of spawned. But isn't it sad that you had the punk, and then you had the Blue Beat revival and the ska and whatever, and then a little bit of the rockabilly, and it's degenerated now to completely anodyne music. And I'm sorry to say that, and you know, I'm not afraid to say it actually, because a lot of people are scared of being perceived as old farts. But if people think that, so be it. But I listen to the radio, you know, a lot of the stuff on the radio, and I've been to see some of these people like Katy Perry and Ariana Grande. My little girl, she's only 12, and it's manufactured. It's what we're talking about. We were talking about something with heart and humanity to it, and anger. Ray, it's anodyne, it's robotic.
What I will say though is that you won't see anodyne down here, and I'll tell you why. Because I agree completely what you say about mainstream music. It's fucking wallpaper. It's like musical wallpaper. It's like lift music, right? But here, you will see some of the best bands you've ever seen.
Still, as well.
I'm telling you now, as far as rock and roll music, indie music, whatever, and a lot of jazz, there are some unbelievable. I would say, seriously, because we just deal. So what we see. Without putting too fine a point at it, what I try and do, because I'm independent, I try using all independent people. So a lot of my promoters are independents, and these are the guys that pick up on bands before they end up playing at the O2 or whatever.
Yeah.
And these are the guys that know what is happening under the surface. So we don't do any mainstream stuff here anymore. All the stuff we do is stuff that's quite underground, and there's like sort of little communities know about it. And I'm telling you, Ray, over this last 4 or 5 years, I have seen some of the best bands that I've seen in a long time.
You know, it delights me.
It's all out there, mate.
It is out there, and I completely agree. And on any scene, whether it's the jazz or blues scene, you've got some incredible young people coming up.
There are.
The only disturbing thing is there isn't enough venues for them to play.
No.
When I started, and we'll get this, you know, I played places like the Bull and, with the Chevalier drums. You remember the Bull and Gate, the Dublin Castle, the George Roby in Finsbury Park. Anyway, whatever. Hundreds of venues. Now you weren't getting paid much, but you'd have an audience. You'd build an audience. And you know what? If you weren't any good or you didn't develop your shit, you wouldn't work. There was a lot of also-rans that dropped out, so you had to get good, because you know what? You got to agree, in the early 80s, the standard was very, very high. Is that right or wrong?
No, I agree.
Very high. And you'd have to get off the stage if you couldn't play.
No, definitely.
I learned to play by sitting in with people like Diz and the Doormen and Dave Patelli. Do you remember guys like that? But
and Ruth Patelli,
Ruth Patelli, all these people down here. But what I was going to say, when was the first time you remember us playing here? Because I know your dad he must have booked us in about 1982.
Yeah, I wasn't here then. In fact, I'll tell you now, Ray, fun enough, last Saturday was the 35th anniversary of me starting working here. So I've now been here 35 years and 2 days. I started working here in 1984, and I think I saw you with the Chevalier brothers either the end of that year or beginning of 85 with Morris, and you know, it was a great band.
And we used to pack it. And then we'd also do double headers here with Diz and the Doormen and Pete Thomas, Deep Sea Jivers.
And the Deep Sea Jivers.
Slim Gaylord.
Slim Gaylord, I remember that.
Where can you go now to find two or three bands on the bill you used to do? You know, it was amazing. But what I was going to say, so we did the Chevalier Brothers and we built the thing. Then we did the Ray Gelato Giants thing. And I remember you used to book us on a Friday or a Saturday. And we used to mob the room out. I've never seen anything like it.
I remember for about... It must have been 7 years straight we were booking you, and you would do 4 gigs a year, maybe every 3 months. And we'd open that door at 7:30 and 8 o'clock, we couldn't get another person in here. Couldn't get another person in here.
It was astounding. And you know what, in those days as well, what I used to find funny was the smoking.
Oh,
because we never knew any different because we grew up in smoke environments. And I just remember getting home.
Oh, man.
I think of smoke, but it was part of it.
But oh, you should have been here, which I was when I was a kid, when we had the Chinese restaurant. So you had the smell of beer, smoke, Chinese food and toilets.
The Chinese food was on the...
It was there, behind there, yeah.
So, but all I'm saying is, and this isn't about me and my career, it's about the club, but I consider this one of my musical homes, this place. I consider we developed down here. We developed an audience down here that still stay with us, because we still do this place. We do it maybe twice a year. And probably the last year or two, we started to pack it again.
You packed it out again,
because we left it for a while. You know, we had management and we had a different. They had a different.
And also, Ray, you know, the thing is, right?
We had to build it again.
I know, but you think about it, right? We're talking about an expansive time of 35 years, Ray. That's a lot. An awful lot has changed in 35 years. So, my dad, he used to cut out all the reviews of all his shows and put them in a scrapbook. And when he got bored of it, he just kept the papers. And I went down to see him a couple of weeks ago, and I started looking through the classified ads of his melody makers and his sounds and his enemies. And I counted up, there were 125 live music venues in Soho and the West End, 125. Now, there's 3 of us.
Jeff, this is what I'm saying, that the sad thing is, the training ground for younger musicians ain't there. And you know what, you've got a lot of guys coming out of college and university, especially on the jazz scene, and they're good players, but there is no substitute whatsoever. So what I always tell people, to learning how to play live, you've got to be shit before you can be good. And you've got to be told off sometimes, you know.
I remember Bobby Gillespie saying to me once, he goes, Jeff, I'll tell you something, there are 1 million good bands in bedrooms, 1 million, but this is where you have to come and cut your teeth. Because if you can't perform, if you can't engage with an audience, especially if you're a front man like you are and Bobby is, forget it. You're never going to get anywhere.
You're never going to get anywhere, and you've got to do it. But I, you know, the funny thing is, when I've got this gig coming up, we've got one coming on November the 16th. It's a nice plug, isn't it? November the 16th, Jeff Horton, Ray Gelato Giants at 100 Club. But I'm only saying it because I get a thrill when I do this place.
Yeah, it's great.
I really get a thrill, and it's part of my heart and soul.
Yeah.
But just while we're talking about it, you know, you seem to be continuing, and you're growing the place. What do you find are the pitfalls? You know, I know the club's gone through hard times, and I've almost lived it with you, where you've said it's been such a.
I'll tell you what, Ray. Honestly,
talk just a little bit about it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, right. So there's 2 things. I think you've got to be a certain kind of person to run a venue, any venue, not just this one. If you don't absolutely love what you do, you're never going to last 5 minutes. And I've lasted 35 years because I'm absolutely passionate about what I do. And what really brought it home was when we nearly went bust in 2010. And there were 2 things that happened. The first was that people started walking through that door, lads from Oldham and Newcastle and Liverpool and Leeds, and go, "Are you the bloke that owns this?" And I'd go, "Yeah." No, mate, come and give us a hug. I wish you all... Blokes I'd never seen before, and some of them hadn't even been here, but they'd heard about it and they'd always wanted to come. Then I had all these letters that turned up. There were envelopes, and I'd open up, and one in particular was from this lady who said, "Dear sir, I am now 83 years old, and I haven't been to the 100 Club since 1965 because I moved up to Norwich, but I've never forgotten what an amazing place it was. I hope this helps." And there was a cheque in there for 500 quid.
Wow.
I was getting money orders coming in from America. Hope this helps, hope this helps. Anyway, I wrote back to all the people that left the forwarding address, and I said to them, "Look, I just want to say this is an amazing gesture. This has made me feel so much better because I didn't realise people like you existed, but I'm not going to cash your cheque. I just wanted to keep it with the letter so that if we manage to continue somehow operating, whenever I have a bad day, I'm just going to open my file and look at them, and I've got them in my drawer. And every time I'm having a bad time, like I've had aggravation with Westminster Council or the landlords or whatever, I just go to this file with all these cheques and these letters, and I just read them through, and I go, I feel 10 times better now for that."
And you know, underneath, because when our noses are to the grindstone like they are, and they are more increasingly now, because things are not easy, they don't get easy, they get harder.
No.
We're saying about the live music thing. I'm in the live music game. You are. We've been here for years. When you just get that little bit of insight that people love what you do, It means everything.
And the other thing that
Means
happened as
everything.
well was, you
It's
know,
a beautiful story.
but the other thing that happened as well was the godfather of rock and roll, really, Paul McCartney. He came and did a show here to highlight the importance of the club. And Barry Marshall, his manager, rang me and said, look, he's in South America, but he's going to fly over and do this show, and he's going to finish his tour in North America. And I went, geez, really? He went, yep. Wow. So he turned up and did the gig, and Barry, so I've got a couple of stories here. So Barry says to me, they're loading overnight, and Barry says, right, so all the productions will be here about 11 o'clock. Then the sound guy's going to get about 12. Then the barrier's coming. I went, what barrier? What barrier? He went, yeah, we're going to put a barrier in. I said, no, you can't put a barrier in. He goes, Jeff, it's Paul McCartney. I went, I don't care, it's the 100 Club. Nobody plays it with a barrier. No. And he went, Jeff, listen, he said, I don't know if you realise, but the day that he plays here is within 2 days of the assassination of John Lennon. And when that anniversary comes round, we get every nutcase in the world emailing us, and they're going to do this to Paul, they're going to do that to Paul, da, da, da. So, Paul McCartney playing your club is a really good thing. Paul McCartney dying in your club's a really bad thing. So let's put the fucking barrier in. So I went, all right, Barry. So he's still the only person. And then he gets, and the other thing is,
what a story,
Barry says to me, you know, he's really nervous. I went, what? How can he be nervous? I said, last week he was playing in Sao Paulo in front of 50,000 people. He goes, yeah, but he can't see anyone. Here, you've got 300 pairs of eyes looking at you.
That's the difference in a small club.
Yeah.
And that's why people of his stature, and Van Morris and people like that, they love to see, to perform in a small venue.
So he gets up and he goes, right, who wants to save the 100 Club? And there's this massive, great big cheer. And then some wag at the back goes, why don't you buy it? And he went, oh, come on, lad, I'm just trying to help. But what was amazing, there was two other things that happened. The night before, when they were loading his piano tech, American guy comes up to me, he goes, hey, Jeff, Paul's going to play your piano tomorrow. And I went, oh, what? That's amazing, really? He goes, well, it might be amazing to you, but I can tell you that's the worst fucking piano he's played in 40 years. You need to get me a Hoover. Because it had been the domain of people like Tommy Burton with like pints all stacked down and stuff. But I went to John Lewis and I got there, and it took me an hour because it was like the busiest shopping day of the year. Went in the electrical department, waited an hour to pick the Hoover up, went downstairs, waited another hour to pick it up from the collection, came back, and he'd taken this piano into pieces. He changed all the strings that needed changing, put new felts on all the hammers and stuff, put it all back together again. And I tell you, Ray, that Hoover cost me 50 quid, and it's the best 50 quid I've ever spent because that piano's hardly gone out of tune ever since.
You're going to do that rag gig, put some new felts. No, mate, honestly, it's incredible. You know what? The McCartney story alone.
But the other thing, there's one other thing I've got to say. One other thing about that show, because it was one of the greatest shows I've ever seen here, you know. You've got to remember, Ray, we're dealing about... So I got Revolver for my 6th birthday, for my mum and dad. So this is like a major thing for me. And I remember you saying about getting those little glimpses of light where you think people appreciate what you do. At the very end of that show, he got up and he went, Mr. 100, you have to keep this place going because it is really, really cool. And I remember listening to that and thinking, do you know what? Just maybe I have been doing the right thing all this fucking time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. That story, I was just going to say, it's unbelievable. And the ending as well with that. It's just because we haven't got a huge amount of time. I know you're busy and whatever, but give us some thoughts on the future and who have you got coming up? Just a few
in terms of the club, we made a decision, or I made a decision a few months ago, that it's now impossible to run any venue as a limited company. So I've become a community interest company, not-for-profit company. And that was all rubber stamped by Companies House a couple of weeks back. And it means I'm not allowed to make a profit, which I don't mind. I haven't made a profit for 10 years, so it's fine.
Yeah.
But what it does mean is that I can now apply for funding, so I can go to the Arts Council, or I can go to any philanthropist or anything like that, and I can say to them, I need X amount of money, can I put an application in, which you can't do as a limited company. And the other thing is that I can also ask for a discount of up to 100% on my business rates. Now, right now, business rates are killing everything, as you probably know. Yeah. I'm currently paying around just under £7,000 a month in business rates here, right? £7,000 a month is killing us. So I have had a big meeting with all the people at Westminster Council. This time I've not been talking to the suits, I've been talking to the heads of departments, head of finance, head of business, and my local MP. And we are in the process of putting an application in for a discount on our business rates. And if I get it, Ray, and I'm touching wood every 5 minutes because this is so important, it will be a massive game changer. Like for 10 years, my daughter said to me, who's 24 now, she said, you know, Dad, you've been talking about the same thing and worrying about the same thing since I was at primary school when I was 8 or 9. She's 23 now.
Puts it in perspective, doesn't it?
And so now, Ray, I feel that I've been run the marathon, right, trying to keep this place going. I've spoken about it in Parliament, about how important grassroots music venues are, how important they are to the Treasury. Live music brings in about £7 billion a year, but it all starts down here. If the bands like you, who had one of your first breaks down here, or whoever, the Sex Pistols, if there aren't places like this, who's going to headline the major festivals in 5 years' time? Nobody.
That's a perfect point.
And therefore, where's that shortfall of money going to come? Why are the tubes running all night long in London if there's nowhere for people to go? Do you know what I mean? So it might seem a very small thing, but I've been arguing this case now for 10 years, saying this is where it all starts. Unless you give us some support, unless you help us, it's not just me and my staff that are going to lose their jobs, and 1,000 people be utterly gutted that the 100 Club's gone. You're talking about everyone being affected. You need to wake up and smell the coffee. And I've spoken in Parliament about this. I've written or co-written reports on grassroots music venues with other venue owners and with Mark David, who runs the Music Venue Trust. And finally, after years of attritional thinking and people with mindsets that are so old, we're finally making some headway. And I feel, Ray, like I say, this will be an absolute game changer for me. I feel like I've run like 23.5 miles of a marathon, and the finishing line is just there, and I've just got to get there. And if I do, Ray, and I manage to get all this for the 100 Club, I've already said with Mark from the Music Venue Trust, we are going to roll this out to every single music venue in the country and go, right, this is what we did to save ourselves, now you do the same. Go and put pressure on your council. If Westminster Council can do something for us, and they haven't yet, we're waiting for that result, I want to just emphasise that, but if we can get them to reduce our business rates by 80% or whatever, that gives every single venue in the country the opportunity to go to their local council and go, this is what they did for the 100 Club, you've got to do the same for me, and they'll be under massive pressure not to do it.
So this basically, if it does well, Jeff, I hope to God it does, I really do, and I know the listeners of this podcast who love the 100 Club will, if it happens, this could be a game changer for the live music
absolute
scene.
game changer. And Ray, will mean, seriously, and there's a part of me that's loath to talk about it before it happens because the disappointment's going to be crushing. But if it happens, Ray, it means that I'm going to be able to plan ahead for the first time. Properly. I mean, I've not been able to think more than 6 months ahead because I'm thinking the club might be closed and I can't book anything past that. Yeah. Now, if this happens, it gives me the opportunity to think maybe 2, even 3 years ahead.
No, honestly, some final thoughts from me. The world needs this venue. I was going to say London, but you get a worldwide audience. Yeah. When we played here, we've had people here from Canada, France.
Exactly.
People come. They come to see. But we really need this venue, and I really hope that it survives and thrives. Do you think the Stones will play here again? That's the final word.
Oh, that'd be great, wouldn't it? Oh, do you know what though? Honestly,
it's a possibility. Isn't it?
You never know, mate. I mean, Ronnie Wood, God bless him. You know, he came and did a show here around the time we almost went under, and he just went, Jeff, you know, whatever you want to charge the door, charge it and keep it. I just want to play here and let you know that we're supporting you. I mean, I've had incredible support from the specials. You know, Terry Hall has been unbelievable. All the guys, all the original guys, Linville, Terry, Horace, they've been incredibly supportive. They've come and done gigs down here and they're doing all kinds of other stuff going on the background. I think, at last, what's happened, Ray, actually, is that people always, for years and years, people always took small grassroots music venues for granted. They just thought they'll always be there.
They'll always be there.
And now people are realising you can't guarantee that. And actually, you know, Ray, where would we be as a nation, right? The UK and Ireland, where would we be without music? What are we without music?
Look what we've done. The UK, apart from the States, we have been the country to have led the way in live music and innovation and creativity.
Do you know
right?
something in my research?
It's a disgrace what they've really
You
done.
look at this little tiny group of islands, right? Do you know that we still sell 1 in every 7 downloads or CDs around the world? This little tiny group of islands sells 1/7 of all worldwide sales. That's how fucking good we are at music.
It's amazing, Jeff. We're gonna close off. I've been speaking to my great friend and the owner, boss, and the Don of the 100 Club, Jeff Horton. Jeff, it's been such a pleasure, mate,
Great.
and it's been
Thank you very much,
to
man.
hear your insights into this business and the live music venues. It's probably been one of the most interesting ones I've done,
Oh,
honestly.
thank you.
And thank you very much, mate. And God bless you. And I hope everything will work out, and I'm sure it will. Take
Cheers,
care.
mate. Thanks very much.